Welcome to your Week 9 demo video. So this video is going to walk you through how to do the in-class assignment for this week. And so obviously right now we're looking at the class website. The top link here will open up the project sheet, which I'll show you in just a minute. Here's an example. Again, I'll show you that in a minute. And then here are the in-class files you're going to need. So depending whether you're in the Monday or the Wednesday class, you will click on your respective links. Let me just hide the browser for now. And this takes us to the example page. And so this is what you're going to be building. You'll notice that it's in a floating window. And as I roll over each one of these names, you will see that the little circle next to the name changes to an image, and then the large square changes to the modified version of that image. These are all different Project 1 images. Go down to David. His is particularly scary. Now, you may not recognize two of the people. Because this demo is working for both classes, I wanted to be even-handed here. So there's two from the Monday class and two from the Wednesday class. Another thing you'll notice is that when I remove the hover on the type, that the circle image goes away, but that the square image stays until I roll over something else. So these are a combination of swap image behaviors. You probably figured that out. And the first thing we're going to do is build the page, and then we will go ahead and insert those different swap image behaviors. All right, so I've brought you into Dreamweaver for a second so I could show you where to put those files that you've downloaded from the class website. You'll notice over here in my Files window, I'm viewing my site folder, and I am inside of my in-class folder, and I've created a new folder called Week 9. Inside that Week 9 folder is a folder called Images. And so the file you download from the class website, just rename it Images, and then drag it into the new folder you create called Week 9 in your site. And then your organization will be exactly the same as mine is. Here is the assignment sheet. And so this kind of is the wireframe for what you're going to be building. You'll notice that it is 2 pages. So we're going to start off on the first page here. And let me just walk you through the basic construction of this. And so, as always, we build from the outside in, the biggest box first. So everything is going to start off being inside of the body, obviously, down in the HTML portion of the code. And right here, you'll notice that this box that is outermost has been labeled wrapper, and so our usual name for the primary container. I'll cover what the specs are for all of these in a minute. But inside of the wrapper is another box right here, and this box is called Rollovers, and you'll notice that I've indicated it is going to float left because it is next to the big pick box over here, which is right here. Inside of the Rollovers box are another couple of boxes. So they're tall and skinny. The one on the left is called Circles, and the one on the right is called Names. Now you'll notice everything so far is an ID because they are unique and primary containers. Once we get inside of the Circles box, you'll notice that there are a bunch of squares, and each one of these squares contains a circle, and they are all identical to each other. So this is a case where we are going to have these be a class. So this is going to be .student circle, and then over here in the names container, these are each going to be student name class. In the big pick box over here, we just have 2 elements. We have an image called square initially. You'll see the size of that. And then underneath that, we have a box called title. And that is the construction. All right, so let's move down to the bottom here. And you'll notice that I've given you some basic instructions to start with. So we're going to start off in the Page Properties window. We'll go into Dreamweaver in just a second and set all of these rules here. And then we're going to work our way over to the CSS Designer window and set these few properties right here. And let's get started. So the first thing we need to do, obviously, is to create a new document. And all the defaults per usual. I am going to go ahead and give my document a title. And so I'm going to call this Week 9, More Divs and Behaviors. And create. So once I've done this, I'm going to make sure I am in Design View. You'll notice here is my title. So the first thing I'm going to do is save the document. So I'm going to put this right inside my Week 9 folder, top level, Week 9. All right, so now we're cooking with gas. So we've got all of our images, we've got our HTML page, and we're ready to start building. Now, something that I'm going to do that's different this week is we're going to create our CSS rules first and then insert them second. The reason for that is I want to show you how to insert divs using the Insert menu. This is just another method. If you like the way we've been doing it before, then stick with that, but this is just another option for you. But in order for us to do this, we have to have some divs to insert, which means we need to write the CSS rules first. So before we go to the Designer window, however, I'm going to pull down here to the Properties window and click on the Design View side, and that will bring up the Page Properties button down in the Properties window. I'm going to choose that, and let's go ahead and set a few things. So I'm going to do some editing here so this video gets a little bit shorter. I'm going to type in all my information and then show you the screen, and then you can pause it if you need to, and then you can type it in. Where I'm getting these measurements from, however, are the project sheet. So if you'd prefer to print that out and just look at that, that may be a little bit easier. Okay, so here's all the stuff I have set in the Page Properties window. You'll notice the font is Cambria. The type size is defined as 0.8 ems. And remember, an M is the default size of the type as defined in the browser, almost always 16 pixels. The text color is a dark green, the background color is a lighter green, and then down here at the bottom are the margins. So you'll notice in the handout that I've indicated margins and padding with shorthand. And so just remember, the first number is the top, and then it goes clockwise from there. So top, right, bottom, and then left. And so that's all reflected down here. Next, let me show you what I set for the links. And so 3 of the link states, basically the link, the visited, and the active are all the same dark green color. And when you hover over a link, it changes to that very light green. Also notice I've made the underline style as never underlined, because you know how I feel about that. But also remember, this is subjective, so you get to choose. And then finally, I changed the H1 heading. So all headings are going to be consoles. And remember, these are all font stacks in here, so I just chose it from the drop-down menu there. And then the size for this is going to be 1.3 em. So that's everything that I have set within here. Now I have a choice. I can click the Apply button to see it before I leave, or I can just click the OK button. So nothing's really been applied yet except for the background color, because we haven't inserted any elements for those rules to apply to, but that will come soon enough. Now, before we go to page 2, there are a couple of things I have to set in the CSS Designer window. So that is over here. And what I want to do is first change the letter spacing that will affect the whole body to be a little bit more open, more spaced out. So I'm going to click on the body selector. over here in the selectors window. Make sure that show set is not checked. And then I'm going to go down to the type area. And what I want to do in here is change the letter spacing, which is towards the bottom here, to be M's, which has gone out of your screen. Sorry about that. And then we are going to change this to be 0.1 M. And then for the H1, we want to change a couple of other things. So find the H1 up here in the selector, and we're going to make the font weight be normal. So type font weight, which is right there. We're going to choose normal. So why am I doing that?
I don't know.
Well, because by default, browsers will make any heading be a bold weight, and I don't want that. I don't want it to be heavyweight. And then finally, I want to set the margin to 0. So I need to scroll up here till I find the boxes. And I'm going to do shorthand here because I want it to be 0 all the way around. So why do I have to set that? Well, remember, type elements, browsers will automatically top and bottom, and that creates a space between them when they stack on top of each other. But I don't want that extra space. I want to define that space myself. So that's why I set it here, I zero it out, and then I can add it back in as I want to. All right, so that is everything on the first page. Next up, we are going to start building all of our boxes. So on to page 2. We're going to first do the left column here, and we're going to create all of our IDs, classes, and tag selectors. And again, we're going to do those first before we create the HTML boxes. And so we're going to do all of this in the CSS Designer window. And so I'm going to do the same thing I did before. Through the magic of editing, I will go ahead and complete all these off screen, and then I will come back and review them with you. All of the selector rules have been written, ID selectors, class selectors, and a single tag selector for the P element. So rather than review this in the CSS Designer window, I'm going to review it over here in the code because I think it's much easier to see. And so everything at the top is what we created initially. And so let's start off with the wrapper here. So you'll notice I didn't give a height to very many boxes, and that's kind of normal for building this kind of stuff, is typically you define a width, and then the height will be defined by whatever the contents are. And so that's what I've done here with the wrapper. I've only given it a width of 800 pixels. For the rollovers box, if you remember, the rollovers box and the big pick boxes are both inside of the wrapper box. They're the two primary containers on the left and the right. The rollovers box on the left has a width of 180, and then it has padding of 40 on the top, 0 on the right and bottom, but then 145 pixels on the left. So why is that? So let's take a look at our diagram for a minute, our wireframe. And so you'll see here is the rollovers box, and here's the 40 pixels at the top, nothing additional on the right or the bottom, but then here is that 145 pixels, which is what's pushing this box over. All right, and you see here the rollovers and big pick are next to each other, and that is the reason why both of these have been given a float. So the rollovers will float to the left, and the big pick will float to the right. And so that keeps me from needing a margin in between the two boxes. So a margin will naturally be created because one is going all the way to the left and the other all the way to the other side. The big pick box has a width of 450, and then it has a padding of 50 pixels at the top. Okay, so circles and names. So these are the two boxes that are inside of the rollovers box. And again, they are next to each other. So again, one is floated left, the other right. The width of the circles box is 75 pixels. and it has a margin of 10 on the top, 10 on the right, 0 on the bottom, and 10 on the left. So please pay very close attention to which margins get which measurement. You'll notice that names below is very similar but not the same. And so that's a common mistake students make on this project, is just kind of getting mixed up with which numbers go where. All right, so we've indicated the title here. The title is actually inside of the big pick box, going underneath that image that is the square. And now we are into the boxes that are inside of the circles and the names boxes. And so back here to our wireframe, so here is the circle box, here is the name box, and inside of that are 4 classes. One called student circle and the other called student name. And so back to Dreamweaver, and you'll see that these are styled again in a very similar way. Student circle and student name both have a width of 75 pixels and a height of 75 pixels. Both have a margin bottom of 10 pixels, and student name just has one additional rule, that is telling the text that is inside the box to align to the left. Now that's actually a default setting, but I've chosen to make sure the browser doesn't try to mess with me. You know how they are.
Yes, dear.
And then finally, we've got our P element, which is going to control the name or the type inside of the student name class boxes. So that, for the same reason I did this with the heading, has a margin of 0 just to strip out any additional spacing. The line height, this is a really nice trick. It's actually fairly easy to center things horizontally within a box. It's very challenging to center things vertically within a box. And so this trick is, line height is the equivalent of line spacing or leading in the print world, except that this doesn't base it on the baseline of the type. It takes the center line of the type and creates equal space above and below that center line. And so basically I made my line height the same as the height of the box, and therefore if it puts equal height above and below the type, it will vertically center it. So one groovy-ass trick there, my friends. And then finally, text transform. This is a nice little trick. It just allows me to type in my content however I want, and this will automatically make it all be uppercase, which is what I would like to do. So all is good. We are ready now to start inserting our divs. So we're going to insert our divs the same way we defined them, and that is to work from the outside in, biggest to smallest. So this insert method I'm going to show you again is just another way of doing the same thing we've been doing. So this will keep you from having to hand code the HTML if you don't want to do that. But if you prefer hand coding the HTML, then that's absolutely fine. There's no right or wrong, just pay attention to typos. So the first box we're going to insert is going to be the wrapper. Then inside of that, the next 2 biggest boxes will be the rollovers and the big pick. We're going to insert the circles ID box and the names ID box. Then we can actually go in and insert our classes, 4 classes, into each of these vertical boxes. And then we'll move over to the other side. We're going to insert the image in there, and we're going to insert the title after the image. So anyway, that is our plan of attack. So let's get back over to Dreamweaver. And what we need to do now is simply go to the Insert window. So please make sure that you are in Design View at this point so that you can see your boxes. And Insert window, you'll notice the very top item is div, but before I click on that, I want to make sure that I put my cursor into the correct place within the body of the code. So here I am down here at the bottom, so I'm going to go to the body element and just kind of split that open, get a little bit more space in there, and put my cursor where I would like it to insert the wrapper, which of course is in between the open and closing body tags. So now I can go back to the div button here, click on that, and it gives me this very simple little window. It's saying insert at insertion point, which is exactly what we want. And then what I want to insert is not a class, but an ID. So I'm going to choose that, and what I want to insert is wrapper. So right here at the very bottom. Boom. Click OK. And there you can see your box in the design view. Now you'll notice a couple of things, that rules have been applied. There is no margin on the left, and there is margin on the top and the right, so that's as it's been set. You'll also notice that it put some content in here. Now I really don't like this feature of Dreamweaver at all, but anytime you insert a div, it automatically puts in content, which says content for ID wrapper goes here, or whatever the name of your container is. So you don't want to leave that in there. If you do, things aren't going to fit right because it's got that stupid type in the way. So what I do is immediately after I insert, I just hit the delete key, click refresh, and now you can see just your box. So every time you do this, you're going to want to delete that placeholder copy. All right, so inside of the wrapper, I need to split the wrapper open now. And let me add some extra space here so it goes a little higher up. And so now inside of the wrapper open and closing tag, I want to insert my cursor. And now I want to go back to the div button, and I want to insert rollovers. Okay, so you'll notice wrapper isn't in the list anymore, and that's because Dreamweaver knows it's been used. You only can use IDs once, so it doesn't even give you the option. So this list will continue getting shorter and shorter. So rollovers, insert, hit the delete key to get rid of the content, and refresh so you can see what you've got. All right, so don't worry if your box changes and lines disappear and stuff like that. As long as you have your organization correct, you're good. So I'm going to take every opportunity I can to just confirm my construction is correct. So you'll see there are my open and closing wrapper tags, and inside of that is my rollover. Okay, so now next I want to put in the big pick box, and the big pick box is going to go also inside of the wrapper, but right underneath rollover. So not inside of it, but underneath it. And so with my cursor there, back to insert div, and this time big pick. Boom, and delete that placeholder text. All right, so now you can see the basic construction of our page is coming into being. We've got our three most primary boxes created, and now we need to put stuff inside of those. All right, so the rollovers box, which is going to get most of the content here, I'm going to split this open. And inside of this, I am going to put those two tall vertical boxes. So let me go back to div. Again, these are IDs. And this time I want to insert circles first. Okay, delete that content. And so all of our boxes are really short right now because I haven't given them the height, if you remember. Neither of you, actually. These will grow taller as we put the content in. So the next box, names, is also inside of rollovers, but it is underneath circles. And this one is names. There we go. Delete. All right. So let's go ahead and get our title into the big pick box, and then we'll come back and populate these two with all of our different classes. Okay. So I'm going to go down here to my big pick box, make the robot butt, and then split this open. And so inside of here, initially is going to go the title. We'll add the image in a little bit. And so div, ID, and there is the last ID we've created. So our list is empty now. Click OK, and there is our title over where it should be. So at this point, with all the IDs inserted, your window should look like mine. Now do keep in mind, if you're working on a very small laptop, sometimes what you're seeing on the screen you can't always trust, so you might want to go ahead and change out of split view so that you can just see the whole thing at one time and make sure it basically looks like mine. If it doesn't, then this is where you need to go through and check your construction. So let me just walk you through this. We've got our body. Everything must be inside of the body. And then our wrapper, which is our primary container. And so you'll see where my open tag is and my closing tag down here. And then inside of the wrapper are going to be our two primary boxes, one called Rollovers, which contains these two boxes, and the other called Big Pick, which contains this one box. And then circles and names inside the Rollovers box are neither one of inside of the other, but they're both inside of Rollovers. In other words, they're just next to each other. Okay? And then the title is just floating on its own inside the Big Pick box. So that's the organization you should have. If you don't, pause the video, and then you can match my organization right here. So let's go on to inserting the classes. And so I gave an instruction in the project sheet here to go ahead and just do the top box in each box, circles and names. And then you can do some copying and pasting, which is the LARW, and will save you some time. So I'm going to split things open a little bit more so it's easier to see. And so inside of the circles box, I want to insert that first class. And so I'm going to go to Div, and this time I am inserting class, and I'm going to choose Student Circle and click OK. And same thing happens, you still get that placeholder text. But now you'll see that things are starting to push down a little bit. And that's because I've given a height to the Student Circle class. And so things will start to grow vertically now. You'll notice also that when I go into the names now, I'm going to split this open. And let's insert the class div for name. And you'll notice that Student Circle is still there. Well, again, Dreamweaver's smart some of the time. Right. And it knows that a class can be used over and over again. So it doesn't remove it from the list. It keeps it in the list always. So I'm going to choose student name this time. And there we go. And now we have our two boxes side by side. Now, this is the point where you can save some effort and energy by going ahead and inserting things before you copy and paste. So what I want to put into the box on the left here is the circle image. And then over here I want to put one of my P elements with the name in it. And then I can copy each of these boxes in the code over here to make my three other boxes of each class. So that will save me some time. All right, so want to find the box that the circle goes into, which is right here. And so you're looking for the div with the class of student circle. Make the robot butt, and I'm just going to split that open a little bit. And right here, I want to insert an image now. So instead of going to div, I'm going to go to image. And go to my images folder, and I want to insert circle PNG. You'll notice the size of this is 75 by 75, same as the box. Click open, and there is the circle. Okay, so that's good. Let me make this a little bit bigger so we can see the code better. And now I want to do the same thing with the class student name. All right, so this time, however, we're not inserting anything. We're just adding a P element, and then within the P element, we're going to put in a name. And so I'm going to make my P tag here. And then inside of that P element, I am going to type the name of the student that will appear in that circle, which is going to be Chantal. Now, I'm not going to worry about capital versus lowercase at this point because I know I've given this a text transform that will make it be all caps. So you'll see that is occurring right there. All right, so now that I have a single instance of each one of those classes, now I can copy and paste and then just modify the content as necessary. So I'm going to start with a circle up here, and you'll notice when I click in this opening tag for the class of student circle, it shows me the closing tag. So that tells me exactly what I need to copy. Another thing to notice is that when I click on the open and closing tag for the parent container, it shows me where the open tag and the closing tag is, and of particular importance is the closing tag. You don't want anything outside of this. You want all four of these classes to be inside of this circles box. Okay, so I'm going to copy that and then click after that closing tag, hit return, and then paste. And when I click refresh, that's exactly what you should see. So I'm going to do that a couple of more times. And now what you want to do is you want to end up with 4 circles right on top of each other, spaced out exactly as you see them. So if yours doesn't look like this, then panic. Or better yet, keep your cool and just kind of check your organization. So when I click on the circles ID box up here, it's going to show that it's containing all 4 of those. If you did this wrong, chances are some of your circles are not going to be inside of that box. And then each of these is simply just an instance of that box with the circle inside of it. So names, exactly the same thing. You want to make sure everything stays inside the names box here, and you want to copy the class student name 3 more times. And there you go. So now all you have to do is come in here and change Chantal to be the other name. So next one is David, then it's Jarlene, and finally it's Noah. And looking good. So we've got one more thing to insert, and then we're going to move on to the next step, which will lead into doing our swap image behaviors. So I want to put in the image of that big green square. That's going to go inside of the big pick box, but it's going to go above the title. Okay? So I want to click my cursor inside big pick, but right above that title div. And then I can just go to image and insert that square. And now we are pretty much constructed, and this is what your file should look like. Before we can get to our swap image behaviors, we need to give each of our shapes that are going to change, or each of our objects that are going to change, an ID so that it will make the JavaScript function and will give us names that we can recognize when we're doing the swap image behaviors. So what I want you to do is click on the top circle next to Chantal, and I would like you to go down to your properties window, in other words all the way down here to the lower left corner, and with that circle marked you should see a little area called ID. Now remember, critically important that these names are absolutely unique. They can't match any ID name, any class name, anything. I tend to be very specific with these just to make sure I don't have a conflict down the road. But if ever you are doing this and all of a sudden one of your buttons doesn't work, one of your swap behaviors doesn't swap, it's very likely that it's a problem with a name conflict. So try to head that off at the pass. So I'm going to name this Chantal and then circle. Okay, so it's very clear. It's the name it is, and it's the shape it is, which will be very helpful when we get to doing the swap images. And I'm going to hit the Enter key, and that will add the ID right here into the code. So I'm going to do the same thing with the other 3 circles, and then also do the same thing with the square here. And the square, there's only one square, so I can be pretty darn generic with that one. So what I'd like you to do now is pause the video, go in and give your other 3 circles the ID they need, and then start it up, and we'll continue on. So there's still a couple of things we need to do before we're ready to do our swap image behavior. One is that we don't have a title in our title box. And so I'm going to come down here in the HTML, split open my title box, and inside of this, I'd like you to create an H1 element. And inside of this, I would like you to put this text in all caps. Comm 380 space colon space and then interactive media design. Click refresh, and there is your heading. Now what we want to do is we want to make it so it's a little more easily seen. So what I want is the Comm 380 and the interactive media design to be white, but I'd like the colon right here to stay that same green color. So in order for me to do this, I need to make one more selector. So I'm going to go back to the designer window and click on the plus sign. And what I want this to be is a class called white type. So dot white type, and I'm camel casing this with the capital T there. And then the only thing I need to do is make the type color be white. And so I'm going to the type area, and up here at the top, I can just drag this to the upper left corner, and voila. So now I have my rule that I can apply. Now nothing's changed, obviously, because I haven't applied it to this text. But this is another neat little trick which you may like. We've talked about span elements before. I think used them maybe once or twice. But span elements are inline elements which are ideal for this type of application of a rule. Because remember, everything is about putting something in a box so that you can style what's inside of the box. So a span is just another kind of box, but it's an inline element, meaning it doesn't need the whole width of the browser window. Well, Dreamweaver can make it very easy to apply such a thing. So with my type marked right here in the code view, I could also do it in design view. I can come down here into the properties window, and you'll notice about a third of the way over from the left, there's a little button called class, and it says none. So I'm going to drop that. And right towards the middle of this list, at the bottom of your screen here, you're going to see something that at first you think isn't there, but actually Dreamweaver makes it white, which is a little strange to me, but whatever. If you hover over it, you can see it, and then you can mark it. And then if I click over here in Design View, you'll see that it made just that bit of type white, and then it wrapped that bit of type into a span. So there's the opening span tag, and there is the closing span tag. So now I need to do that for interactive media design. So I'm going to drag over this, go down to the class box in the properties window, and again choose white type, and then it also adds a span around that block of type, and therefore giving me exactly the effect I want. So that is it for everything except for the swap image behaviors. Okay, so let's swap some images, baby. Now, this is easy, as you know from when we did it in class last week. But again, if you don't follow the steps in exactly the right order, then things aren't going to work the way you want them to. So, I've written these steps down on the handout, but I'm going to walk you through them here. And so the first thing you want to do is click in Chantal's name. Now the reason for that is because this is going to be the trigger for the swap image behavior. So if you remember what happens when I hover over the name, the circle will change and the square will change. when I pull out of the hover on the name, then the square will remain, but the circle will revert back to its original form here. Okay, restore image is what that is called. So the first thing we need to do, click in the name, and then I want you to go down to the tag selector. So remember, that's what this thing down here is called. And what I want you to do is to click on the P in the tag selector, and that will mark the text in both code and design view. And then I want you to go down to the link field in the properties window. And so remember, what we want this to do is we don't need it to actually be a link to go anywhere, but we want it to behave like a link. That will trigger the type color change on hover, and it will also give us the little disembodied Mickey Mouse hand. So all I have to do to make it behave like the link is to type a hashtag into the link field. And again, good idea to hit the enter key so that you make sure that executes. So you'll notice I'm not unmarking anything, I'm just leaving it as it is, but now I have added an anchor selector, and that is currently what's active. Then I'm going to go to my behaviors window. So we added this last week, however you may be on a different computer now. So if you don't have a behaviors window, you can go up to the window menu at the top, drop that menu, find behaviors. It will give you a little floating window that you can then just drag over here to the dock on the side. Once you have that open, what you want to do is you want to click on this plus sign to add a behavior. So this will drop a menu. And what you want to do is you want to swap an image. So I'm going to choose that. It brings up this little window. And again, this is one of the reasons why giving each one of your images an ID is important, is so that you know what is what. So Chantal, I actually want her to change in this case, but we're not going to do her yet. We're going to do her second. And this is all about what is going to restore image, right down here, and what is not going to restore. And so the first one I want to swap is the square, and I want that to become a square image of Chantal. So I'm going to click on Browse, and I am going to choose Chantal Square to replace the big green square, and then I'm just going to click OK. Okay, so over here in the behavior window, you'll see there is a mouse over swap image, and there it says on mouse out, swap image restore. So let's go ahead and save this and preview this in a browser. And there we go. So now when I roll over Chantal, look what happens. The square image is replaced by the large image of Chantal in a square. So the next thing we want to do is we would like to get this circle image to also show up. And you'll notice that right now, as you see how the square is restoring back to its regular square form. Okay, remember that. Back to Dreamweaver. And now everything is still marked. I haven't unmarked anything at all. And I'm going to go right back here to the plus sign and choose Swap Image again. And this time, I'm going to choose the Chantal circle, and I'm going to browse to what I want that to become, which is the Chantal circle PNG, and click OK. Let's save that, and then let's go back to our browser here, and your preview should automatically update, and there you can see it. Now something interesting has happened. Is the Chantal circle image now restores to its original form, but the square does not. The square stays in place. So that's actually what I want. I want that to stay the same until I hover on something else. But why is it doing that? Well, if you have multiple swap image behaviors, as we do, it will only apply to the most recent. And so let me go back here. So you can see here's the swap image behavior. It will only apply to the one you did most recently. And so that is applying to this guy here. and here is the swap image restore up here. And so you can change the order of these if you decide you would rather have the other image restore. But what happens if you would like them both to swap and restore at the same time? Well, you can do that. And I'm not going to do it here, but let me just show you how. If you come in here, you will notice that this is for the square, and you'll see this little asterisk right here. Well, that tells me that that is the image that the behavior has been attached to. So if I click on that, it will show me that it's set the source to the Chantal square. Now, if I also wanted Chantal circle to be part of this behavior, I can do this. I can just then click on Chantal circle and then set the source to Chantal circle PNG, and now you'll see that there's an asterisk next to that. So in other words, this single behavior is changing two images at the same time. So could you change these three as well? You could, so that a single instance of rolling over an object could trigger a whole bunch of different things on your page to change, and then they would all restore on mouse out. So anyway, making a point of that because that may be something you want to do. And by the way, a little bit of a hint, you might want to note this down. The practical final exam we're going to have, this will be one of the things you have to do in the practical final exam. So make a note of that so you remember how to do it. But I'm going to cancel out of this because I actually like this behavior the way it is. So I'm going to do one more, and then I'm going to stop and let you just finish this up on your own. So I'm going to click inside of David here. I want to click on the P tag in the tag selector, and then I want to put the hashtag into the link box in the properties window, and then I want to click on the plus sign to create my swap image behavior. And so remember, the first thing I want to change is the square, and I want to change that to David Square. Click OK. And then before I unmark anything, I go right back to that swap image window again. And this time I specify that I want Circle David to change to David Circle. And OK, and then save. And then back to the browser. And so Chantal, she's still working just fine. And then when I pull over David, now his image is sticking and his little circle still works. But I can bring Chantal back just by hovering over hers. So obviously you need to do the other two here. And then you have the opportunity for a bonus point. And that is, if I go back to my example page, you'll notice that, they're all working the same way as yours is going to end up working. But at a certain point, what if I just wanted this to go back to become normal again? In other words, the green square. Well, I've actually done something here where when I hover over the Comm 380 or the interactive media design, and then I click on it, it will force the page to reload and go back to its original form. So this is written on the project sheet. If you go into my code for this page here, in other words, the online version of this, then you can see how I did it, and you can take that code and put it into your page to make your page have the same behavior. So if you do that, you get another point, and it's a pretty easy point to get. So you should probably take advantage of that. Also notice in step 12 of the project sheet that I am asking you to add a link to your site page that opens up the week 9 project. No surprise there, but do notice that I am asking you to have it open in a new browser window that is a specific size. So I'm not going to show you how to do this, chances are, if you look in the behaviors, you can kind of figure it out yourself. There is also a movie which is required viewing for this week, which you should have already watched. So you learned how to do it already, I'm sure.
For sure.
So that is required as well. Once you are done, you can either upload the files to your server or you can upload it to the GoDaddy server. Do keep in mind that when your Project 4 is due in a couple of weeks, that must be live on the internet. So if you are not live and you haven't dealt with that yet, you need to deal with it now. And so that you don't lose points because it's not live on the internet. All right, so I'm going to end it here and just say I know this was a long video. It's kind of unfortunate. This is the most intensive, difficult demo of the entire semester. So, of course, this is the first one I have to record. Hopefully, I've made this as understandable as possible. So good luck with everything. Let me know if you have questions that aren't answered here.